Have you ever just stared at a world map and wondered why one of the biggest landmasses on Earth is, well, largely empty? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating demographic mysteries out there, the massive, seemingly void continent of Australia. It literally defies expectations. So let's figure out exactly why its population numbers look the way they do.
To set the stage, think about this. Australia is roughly the size of the contiguous US, but it only has a little over 26 million people. Just let that sink in for a second. We're talking about an entire continent where 95% of the landmass is almost completely devoid of human population. So the big question we're tackling today is, why? Why is almost this entire continent completely empty?
The scale of this emptiness is honestly staggering. Take the island of Java. It's roughly 6 times smaller than the Australian continent, yet it holds nearly 6 times the population. And get this, the Tokyo metropolitan area alone outnumbers the entire population of Australia. Meanwhile, the lower 48 US states, which again is a very comparable landmass, holds over 300 million people.
To really drive this home, take Anna Creek Ranch. It's a privately owned cattle ranch that is literally larger than the entire country of Israel. But how many people actually run this massive territory? Well, it's staffed by only 8 full-time employees, managing around 10,000 cows. You literally have an area the size of a nation that's home to fewer than a dozen human beings. Insane, right?
Section 1. More than a desert.
Now, when we think of Australia's emptiness, our minds usually jump straight to the vast deserts, the famously venomous wildlife, and the incredibly harsh climate. And sure, the continent definitely battles immense geographic curses. We're talking cold ocean currents in the west that block rain clouds, and the Great Dividing Range in the east that casts this severe rain shadow over the interior. Add in highly erratic rainfall and really low river flows, like the Murray-Darling Basin, which barely trickles compared to something like the Mississippi River. But here's the thing. As imposing as these factors are, they're actually a bit of a historical red herring. They don't tell the whole story.
Because here is an absolutely crucial point. Australia actually possesses 1.9 hectares of arable land per citizen. That is the highest ratio in the entire world. To put that into perspective, the US has about 0.47 hectares per citizen. This means if Australia just had the same ratio of usable land to people as the US, the continent's existing resources could theoretically support well over 90 million people. So you see, it's not strictly a lack of land or resources keeping the numbers down.
Section 2. The isolated, lost continent.
So if it's not just the geography holding it back, what is it? Well, the answer really lies in millions of years of profound geological and human isolation. Let's trace the timeline here because it's pretty fascinating. Indigenous humans first reached the continent around 50,000 years ago. But when the last ice age ended and the Sahol land bridge flooded roughly 10,000 years ago, the continent was physically cut off from the outside world. Aside from maybe a couple of very minor encounters, it remained entirely undisturbed by outside humans until European arrival began centuries later.
And even when early Europeans did stumble upon it, it certainly didn't spark immediate growth. Take this really haunting example from 1656. A Dutch ship called the Vergilde Draak crashed off the western coast. 7 survivors managed to make it to Jakarta to sound the alarm, but 68 survivors were left behind. Despite multiple search and rescue missions by the Dutch Navy, those 68 people simply vanished. Poof! Without a trace into the continent's vast, unforgiving interior. Their ultimate fate is still a total mystery today.
Section 3. Late to the party.
Because of this incredible remoteness, Australia arrived remarkably late to the global demographic party. They completely missed out on centuries of industrialization and the exponential population growth the rest of the world was going through. By the time the British finally established a permanent European settlement in 1788, the Aboriginal population of the entire continent was estimated at roughly 650,000. Meanwhile, Europe was already sitting at 150 million, and Asia was massively booming at 650 million. Australia was starting from a microscopic baseline.
Now, because population growth naturally tends to be exponential, starting centuries behind created this massive compounding demographic lag. It literally took Australia more than a century of history, all the way until 1906, just to reach the 4 million people the US already had way back in 1788. And by that same year, 1906, America's population was already pushing 90 million, so Australia was playing a severe game of catch-up.
Section 4. The White Australia Bottleneck.
But this lag wasn't just an accident of timing or geography. It was actually heavily enforced by historical legislation. In 1901, the government enacted the White Australia policy. As a matter of historical fact, this was an exclusionary, race-based policy that severely limited entry, restricting immigration specifically to people of white European ancestry and heavily favoring British migrants. By legally dictating exactly who could enter, the government severely throttled its own incoming population pool, creating a massive, self-imposed demographic bottleneck. As a direct result of this exclusionary policy, we see a massive divergence in the early 20th century. While literally millions of immigrants were flooding into places like the United States and Canada every couple of years, Australia choked its own growth down to a mere trickle of preferred migrants. They essentially sidelined themselves during one of the most crucial, booming eras of global human expansion.
Section 5. A modern multicultural boom.
This tightly restricted era finally came to a dramatic end, largely triggered by severe demographic panics during World War II. Step 1. Imperial Japan, which had over 10 times Australia's population, bombed the northern city of Darwin. This created a massive, immediate fear that Australia was just too sparsely populated to defend itself against an invasion. So, Step 2. Fearing this vulnerability, the government pivoted to a strategy to rapidly increase their numbers, gradually expanding post-war migration to include all Europeans. And finally, Step 3. By 1973, the restrictive White Australia policy was officially overturned entirely, completely removing race as a factor for immigration.
Ever since that pivot, Australia has fully embraced official multiculturalism and welcomed multi-ethnic immigration from all over the world. Today, they cap new immigrants at just under 200,000 a year. Think about what that actually means for a society. As of 2022, nearly 1 in 3 current residents on the continent was born outside of Australia. That is the absolute highest proportion of immigrants found in the population of any developed Western nation today.
Fueled by this modern multicultural boom, and heavily driven by continued immigration from across Asia and the rest of the world, the continent's population is finally surging. It's currently projected to reach an impressive 36 million people by the year 2050. To put that into perspective, that's roughly equivalent to the entire population of Canada today.
But as we look at this incredible modern transformation, we're left to ponder a pretty critical question. With climate change looming and crucial agricultural lifelines like the Murray-Darling River Basin increasingly suffering from heat, droughts, and evaporation, we have to ask, can the continent finally overcome its deeply ancient, harsh geography to sustain this completely unprecedented new chapter of growth, or will Australia's fierce environment ultimately dictate its limits once again? It's definitely something to think about as you consider the future of this massive, fascinating continent.